Epsilon Prime was supposed to be humanity's beacon of hope, a thriving colony on the edge of the galaxy, home to over 5 million people. Its towering spires and energy fields shimmered under the light of the twin suns. Children played in the biodomes, while miners extracted rare elements from the nearby asteroid belt. Life was peaceful. Too peaceful. Commander Elias Kane had felt it for weeks, the unsettling quiet before a storm. But no one had listened. And now, the storm had arrived. The first warning came in the form of static over the colony's communication grid. Kane was in the control tower when it happened, watching the energy readouts flicker. His second-in-command, Lieutenant Aaron Kane, his younger brother, stood next to him, tapping impatiently on a holopad. "Com interference?" Aaron asked. "Maybe," Elias replied, but his gut told him otherwise. His military instincts, sharpened through years of service, screamed that something was wrong. Suddenly, the colony's early warning systems blared to life. A red pulse of light filled the control room. Kane's head snapped toward the holo display. Hundreds of crimson dots lit up the screen, converging toward Epsilon Prime's orbit. His heart sank. "Multiple contacts inbound," shouted the comm officer. "Signature, Telkari." Kane's blood ran cold. The Telkari were more than just aliens. They were predators, technologically advanced, ruthless, and efficient. They'd conquered dozens of species across the galaxy, leaving only ashes in their wake. Kane grabbed the console. "Sound the evacuation alarm. Get the civilians to the shelters." Aaron paled. "You think they'll make it?" "No," Kane said, jaw tightening, "but we're going to buy them as much time as we can." The colony's defense grid powered up. Long-range plasma turrets aligned toward the incoming threat. The holo display zoomed in. Telkari warships, sleek and black like obsidian knives, cut through the darkness of space. At the center of the fleet was a dreadnought, a monstrous vessel bristling with weapons. The defense grid opened fire. Streaks of blue plasma arced through space, hammering into the Telkari ships. A few smaller vessels exploded, but the dreadnought's energy shields absorbed the assault like it was nothing. "They're not even trying to evade," Aaron muttered. "They don't need to," Kane said grimly. The dreadnought returned fire. A beam of crimson light shot from its forward cannons, striking the colony's defense array. The entire tower shuddered. Kane and Aaron were thrown to the floor as sparks rained from the ceiling. "Shield integrity down to 20%, shouted the tech officer. Kane pulled himself up. "Redirect auxiliary power to the shields." Another beam slammed into the colony's surface. Explosions rippled across the city. Skyscrapers crumbled. Fire and smoke rose into the atmosphere. Kane's stomach turned as he saw civilians running through the streets below. Some were caught in the blast. Bodies flew through the air like ragdolls. "Commander," Aaron shouted. Kane turned just in time to see the side of the control room erupt in fire. A piece of shrapnel shot across the room. Aaron tackled Kane out of the way, but the shrapnel caught Aaron across the side. Blood sprayed across the floor. "Aaron." Kane crawled to his brother's side. Aaron's eyes were wide with shock as blood poured from his side. "I'm fine," Aaron gasped. "Just a scratch." Kane ripped off his combat vest and pressed it to the wound. "You'll be okay. Just hang on." The ground shook violently. Kane's earpiece crackled. "Ground breach," came a panicked voice. "Telkari drop pods are deploying." Through the smoke-streaked window, Kane saw hundreds of black pods falling from the sky. They hit the colony's surface with deafening impacts. The pods opened, and the Telkari soldiers emerged, towering biomechanical warriors with jet-black armor and glowing red eyes. They'd moved like predators, cutting down civilians with bladed limbs and plasma rifles. Kane's anger boiled over. "We need to stop them." Aaron groaned. "I can still fight." "No." Kane's hand tightened on his brother's shoulder. "Stay down. That's an order." Kane grabbed his plasma rifle from the rack and activated his tactical visor. His HUD flickered to life, highlighting the cell carry invaders below. "All strike teams, rally on me," Kane shouted into his comms. He sprinted toward the nearest dropship bay, heart pounding. His squad was already waiting: Sergeant Bonner, Corporal Jax, and Private Leo. They stood at attention as Kane approached. "We've got hostiles all over the city," Kane said. "We hold the evacuation routes, no matter the cost." "Yes, sir," Bonner snapped. The dropship's rear door opened. Kane led his team inside. As they lifted off, the chaos below came into full view. Zelkari soldiers cut down civilians. Plasma turrets fired into the invading ranks, but the Zelkari shrugged off the hits, their armor regenerating in real time. The dropship hovered over the colony's main square. Kane's team fast roped down into the fray. His boots hit the pavement hard. He raised his rifle and fired. A Zelkari soldier's head exploded in a shower of green mist. Bonner and Jax flanked him, cutting down hostiles with precision shots. Kane stepped over the body of a fallen colonist, a child, no more than 6 years old. His throat tightened, but he pushed it aside. No time for grief. A Zelkari warrior charged toward him, plasma blades glowing. Kane ducked, rolled, and fired upward. His rifle's energy bolt punched through the alien's skull. Green blood splattered across the pavement. "Commander," Bonner shouted, "we've got incoming." A Zelkari gunship swooped low, cannon spinning. It unleashed a barrage of plasma fire. Kane threw himself behind a wrecked vehicle as the street exploded around him. "We can't hold this position," Jax yelled. "We're not holding it," Kane growled. "We're buying time." His earpiece crackled again. A new signal. Unidentified human ship entering orbit. Kane's eyes narrowed. "Repeat that." A bright flash erupted in the sky. Kane's visor darkened to compensate. Through the smoke, a massive warship descended from hyperspace. It was human, but unlike anything Kane had ever seen. Sleek, black, and armed to the teeth. The ship's forward cannons glowed blue. "Who the hell is that?" Jax asked. The ship's guns opened fire. Blue lances of energy tore through the Zelkari fleet, cutting through shields like paper. One Zelkari destroyer exploded in a ball of fire. The gunship hovering over Kane's squad exploded midair. Flaming debris crashed into the street. A transmission came through Kane's comm. "This is Captain Lyra Cole of the Retribution," a calm, controlled voice said. "We've got you covered." Kane stared upward as the Retribution hovered above the colony. Zelkari ships turned to engage, but the human warship's guns fired with brutal efficiency. "Commander Kane," Lyra's voice crackled through the comm. "Let's show these predators that humanity is not prey." Kane smiled darkly. "Copy that." Kane reloaded his rifle and stepped forward as the Zelkari regrouped. "All units," he said, voice like steel, "counterattack." He raised his rifle and charged. Behind him, his squad followed. Above them, the Retribution's cannons roared. The storm had arrived, but humanity wasn't running anymore. Elias Kane stood on the deck of the Retribution, still trying to process what had just happened. Less than an hour ago, Epsilon Prime was under full-scale assault by the Zelkari. He had been prepared to die on that colony, fighting until his last breath to protect what little remained of humanity's fragile foothold in the galaxy. But then, out of nowhere, this ship had arrived, cutting through the Zelkari fleet with terrifying precision. And now he was standing here, alive, staring at the person who had made it possible. Captain Lyra Cole stood in front of him, her sharp green eyes studying him like a predator sizing up prey. She was tall, with short dark hair and a scar running across her left cheek. Her uniform was black and crisp, with a silver insignia Kane didn't recognize. She stood with the posture of someone who was used to command, calm, calculating, and completely in control. "Welcome aboard, Commander Kane," Lyra said coolly. Kane's eyes narrowed. "How the hell did you find us?" Lyra smiled faintly. We've been monitoring that cell carry fleet movements for some time now. Epsilon Prime was their next logical target. Kane shook his head. I've never seen a ship like this. What is the retribution? Lyra's expression darkened. Humanity's last chance. The ship's interior was unlike any human vessel Kane had ever seen. The walls were sleek black metal, etched with faint blue lines that pulsed like veins. The corridors were narrow, and the lighting was dim, casting long shadows. Kane could hear the hum of the ship's core beneath his feet, a low vibration that seemed almost alive. Lyra led him down a long hallway toward the ship's command center. Your ship tore through the cell carry like they were nothing, Kane said. Our weapons barely scratched their shields. What's different about this one? Lyra stopped in front of a reinforced door. It slid open with a soft hiss, revealing the command center. The room was circular, with holoscreens floating in the air, displaying real-time tactical data and star charts. At the center of the room was a raised platform, where a glowing sphere of blue light hovered in midair. Echo, Lyra said, and the sphere pulsed brightly. A soft voice emerged from the sphere. Female, calm, and cold. Captain Cole. Commander Kane. Welcome. Kane frowned. An eye. Not just any eye, Lyra said. Echo is an advanced quantum eye, the most powerful system humanity has ever created. Echo's light shimmered. My neural architecture is built on reverse-engineered cell carry technology. I can process over 400 trillion calculations per second. Kane's eyes widened. Reverse-engineered cell carry tech. How? Lyra walked toward the holoscreens and tapped one. It showed a grainy image of an ancient alien ruin on the surface of Mars. 30 years ago, an excavation team on Mars uncovered remnants of an ancient alien structure. We thought it was just another dead civilization, until we realized the technology inside was still active. The XL carry? Kane asked. No, Lyra said. Something older. Kane's pulse quickened. We spent decades studying the ruins, Lyra continued. We learned how to integrate the alien tech into our own systems. That's how Echo was created. That's how the Retribution was built. Echo's light pulsed. My core programming was designed to counter cell carry technology. I can predict their fleet movements, disrupt their communication networks, and bypass their shields. Kane shook his head in disbelief. We had this tech all along. Why wasn't it shared with the rest of the fleet? Because we weren't ready, Lyra said. The cell carry have been hunting us for centuries. Humanity wasn't prepared to fight them on equal ground. Until now. Kane's jaw tightened. And what changed? Lyra's eyes flashed. Epsilon Prime. Kane's fists clenched. You knew they were going to attack, didn't you? Lyra didn't blink. We suspected it. Kane stepped toward her. You let 5 million civilians become bait. Lyra's gaze hardened. We needed to draw the cell carry fleet out of hiding. The only way to strike a fatal blow was to lure them into a trap. Kane's blood boiled. My brother died down there. Lyra's expression didn't change. And how many more would have died if we hadn't intervened? Kane's hands curled into fists. He wanted to hit her. But deep down, he knew she was right. The cell carry had been striking human colonies for decades, and the humans had been losing every single battle. Lyra's strategy had turned the tide. But at what cost? Echo's voice interrupted the silence. Captain Cole. Zelkari survivors are retreating. However, Supreme Commander Vorsk Tal's flagship remains in the system. Kane's eyes narrowed. He's still here. Vorsk Tal is the architect of the cell carry invasion strategy, Echo said. He will not retreat unless he believes he has no other choice. Then we make him retreat, Kane growled. Lyra's lips curved into a cold smile. My thoughts exactly. Echo's sphere brightened. Vorsk Tal's flagship is shielded by a quantum barrier. Direct assault would be unwise. Kane's mind raced. What if we bypass the shields? Lyra arched an eyebrow. How? Kane studied the holo-display of the Selkeri flagship. If Echo can hack into their communication systems, we can create a feedback loop, overload their internal systems, and take down the shields from the inside. Echo's light flickered. Possible. Probability of success, 36%. I'll take those odds, Kane said. Lyra's eyes darkened. That would require a direct insertion onto the flagship, a small strike team. Kane's jaw tightened. I'll leave the team. You're injured, Lyra said. I'm still breathing. Lyra studied him for a long moment. Then she nodded. Fine. Assemble your team. We'll deploy within the hour. Kane turned toward the door, but Lyra's voice stopped him. Kane. He turned back. This isn't just about revenge, Lyra said. If we take out Vorsk Tal, that Selkeri chain of command will collapse. We could end the war. Kane's gaze was like steel. Then we don't miss. He left the room, his heart pounding. His mind was already assembling the team in his head. Bonner, Jax, Leo. They'd faced impossible odds before, but this was different. This was humanity's first real shot at winning. As he walked down the dimly lit corridor, Echo's soft voice echoed through the ship's speakers. Commander Kane. He stopped. What? I have analyzed your combat history. Your survival rate is low. Kane's lips curled into a grim smile. Then you don't know humans very well. Echo's light flickered. Perhaps not. Kane's fists tightened. Tell the team to suit up. We're taking the fight to them. Echo's light glowed brighter. Acknowledged. Kane stepped into the armory. The hum of the ship's core seemed louder now. His hand closed around the grip of his plasma rifle. Humanity had been running for centuries. That ended today. Elias Kane stood on the deck of the Retribution, still trying to process what had just happened. Less than an hour ago, Epsilon Prime was under full-scale assault by the Selkeri. He had been prepared to die on that colony, fighting until his last breath to protect what little remained of humanity's fragile foothold in the galaxy. But then, out of nowhere, this ship had arrived, cutting through the Selkeri fleet with terrifying precision. And now he was standing here, alive, staring at the person who had made it possible. Captain Lyra Cole stood in front of him, her sharp green eyes studying him like a predator sizing up prey. She was tall, with short dark hair and a scar running across her left cheek. Her uniform was black and crisp, with a silver insignia Kane didn't recognize. She stood with the posture of someone who was used to command, calm, calculating, and completely in control. Welcome aboard, Commander Kane, Lyra said coolly. Kane's eyes narrowed. How the hell did you find us? Lyra smiled faintly. We've been monitoring the Selkeri fleet movements for some time now. Epsilon Prime was their next logical target. Kane shook his head. I've never seen a ship like this. What is the Retribution? Lyra's expression darkened. Humanity's last chance. The ship's interior was unlike any human vessel Kane had ever seen. The walls were sleek black metal, etched with faint blue lines that pulsed like veins. The corridors were narrow, and the lighting was dim, casting long shadows. Kane could hear the hum of the ship's core beneath his feet, a low vibration that seemed almost alive. Lyra led him down a long hallway toward the ship's command center. Your ship tore through the Selkeri like they were nothing, Kane said. Our weapons barely scratched their shields. What's different about this one? Lyra stopped in front of a reinforced door. It slid open with a soft hiss, revealing the command center. The room was circular, with holoscreens floating in the air, displaying real-time tactical data and star charts. At the center of the room was a raised platform, where a glowing sphere of blue light hovered in midair. Echo, Lyra said, and the sphere pulsed brightly. A soft voice emerged from the sphere. Female, calm, and cold. Captain Cole. Commander Kane. Welcome. Kane frowned. An eye. Not just any eye, Lyra said. Echo is an advanced quantum eye. The most powerful system humanity has ever created. Echo's light shimmered. My neural architecture is built on reverse-engineered cell-carry technology. I can process over 400 trillion calculations per second. Kane's eyes widened. Reverse-engineered cell-carry tech. How? Lyra walked toward the holoscreens and tapped one. It showed a grainy image of an ancient alien ruin on the surface of Mars. 30 years ago, an excavation team on Mars uncovered remnants of an ancient alien structure. We thought it was just another dead civilization, until we realized the technology inside was still active. The XL carry? Kane asked. No, Lyra said. Something older. Kane's pulse quickened. We spent decades studying the ruins, Lyra continued. We learned how to integrate the alien tech into our own systems. That's how Echo was created. That's how the Retribution was built. Echo's light pulsed. My core programming was designed to counter Xelcarry technology. I can predict their fleet movements, disrupt their communication networks, and bypass their shields. Kane shook his head in disbelief. We had this tech all along. Why wasn't it shared with the rest of the fleet? Because we weren't ready, Lyra said. The Xelcarry have been hunting us for centuries. Humanity wasn't prepared to fight them on equal ground. Until now. Kane's jaw tightened. And what changed? Lyra's eyes flashed. Epsilon Prime. Kane's fists clenched. You knew they were going to attack, didn't you? Lyra didn't blink. We suspected it. Kane stepped toward her. You let 5 million civilians become bait. Lyra's gaze hardened. We needed to draw the Xelcarry fleet out of hiding. The only way to strike a fatal blow was to lure them into a trap. Kane's blood boiled. My brother died down there. Lyra's expression didn't change. And how many more would have died if we hadn't intervened? Kane's hands curled into fists. He wanted to hit her, but deep down, he knew she was right. The Xelcarry had been striking human colonies for decades, and the humans had been losing every single battle. Lyra's strategy had turned the tide. But at what cost? Echo's voice interrupted the silence. Captain Cole. Xelcarry survivors are retreating. However, Supreme Commander Vorsk Tal's flagship remains in the system. Kane's eyes narrowed. He's still here. Vorsk Tal is the architect of the Xelcarry invasion strategy, Echo said. He will not retreat unless he believes he has no other choice. Then we make him retreat, Kane growled. Lyra's lips curved into a cold smile. My thoughts exactly. Echo's sphere brightened. Vorsk Tal's flagship is shielded by a quantum barrier. Direct assault would be unwise. Kane's mind raced. What if we bypass the shields? Lyra arched an eyebrow. How? Kane studied the holo-display of the Xelcarry flagship. If Echo can hack into their communication systems, we can create a feedback loop, overload their internal systems, and take down the shields from the inside. Echo's light flickered. Possible. Probability of success, 36%. I'll take those odds, Kane said. Lyra's eyes darkened. That would require a direct insertion onto the flagship, a small strike team. Kane's jaw tightened. I'll lead the team. You're injured, Lyra said. I'm still breathing. Lyra studied him for a long moment. Then she nodded. Fine. Assemble your team. We'll deploy within the hour. Kane turned toward the door, but Lyra's voice stopped him. Kane. He turned back. This isn't just about revenge, Lyra said. If we take out Vorsk Tal, the Xelcarry chain of command will collapse. We could end the war. Kane's gaze was like steel. Then we don't miss. He left the room, his heart pounding. His mind was already assembling the team in his head. Bonner, Jax, Leo. They'd faced impossible odds before, but this was different. This was humanity's first real shot at winning. As he walked down the dimly lit corridor, Echo's soft voice echoed through the ship's speakers. Commander Kane. He stopped. What? I have analyzed your combat history. Your survival rate is low. Kane's lips curled into a grim smile. Then you don't know humans very well. Echo's light flickered. Perhaps not. Kane's fists tightened. Tell the team to suit up. We're taking the fight to them. Echo's light glowed brighter. Acknowledged. Kane stepped into the armory. The hum of the ship's core seemed louder now. His hand closed around the grip of his plasma rifle. Humanity had been running for centuries. That ended today. Kane stood in the dimly lit armory, the cool metal of his plasma rifle resting against his chest. The hum of the ship's core pulsed beneath his feet like a heartbeat. Around him, his team was gearing up. Bonner securing the straps on his combat armor, Jax checking the charge on his pulse rifle, and Leo running a diagnostic on her wrist console. The tension in the room was palpable. No one spoke, but they all knew what was at stake. Echo's voice crackled over the comms. Commander Kane, we are approaching the Cell-Carry flagship. Estimated time to intercept, 7 minutes. Kane's jaw tightened. Understood. Lyra stepped into the armory, her eyes sharp and focused. You know the plan. Kane nodded. Echo creates a feedback loop to disable their shields. We breach the hull, take out Vorsktal, and cripple the ship from the inside. Lyra's gaze hardened. You have one shot at this. If the Cell-Carry detect you before Echo finishes the loop, they'll flood the ship with reinforcements. Kane's eyes narrowed. We won't give them the chance. Echo's voice came through the comms again. Commander Kane, the Cell-Carry flagship's defense systems are active. Quantum shields at 93%. Initiating infiltration protocol. Kane tightened the strap on his chest plate. Team on me. Bonner slapped a fresh clip into his rifle and grinned. About time we got to hit back. Jack smirked. Don't get cocky. Leo adjusted the targeting scope on her wrist console. Let's just make it back in one piece. Kane stepped toward the armory doors. We're not here to survive. We're here to win. The doors slid open, revealing the dark interior of the drop bay. The strike pod was already primed and ready, its metallic surface gleaming under the dim lights. Kane climbed in first, followed by Bonner, Jax, and Leo. The pod's interior was cramped and cold. Kane secured the harness over his chest as the doors sealed shut with a hiss. Echo's voice echoed through the pod. Preparing launch sequence. Breach window in T-minus 30 seconds. Kane closed his eyes and took a slow breath. The Cell-Carry had taken everything from humanity. Colonies, families, lives. They had slaughtered billions. But now humanity had a weapon of its own. 10 seconds to launch, Echo's voice said. Team, stay tight, Kane ordered. We hit hard and fast. The pod jolted as the launch clamps released. Kane's body pressed against the seat as the pod shot out of the retribution like a bullet. The viewport filled with the dark expanse of space, stars blurring past. Ahead, the massive shape of the Cell-Carry flagship loomed like a black hole, its hull pulsing with eerie red light. The ship was enormous, nearly the size of a human battle station. Towering spires jutted from its surface like jagged teeth. Approaching breach point, Echo said. Activating cloaking field. A shimmering field of blue energy flickered across the pod's surface. Kane watched as the Cell-Carry's defense turrets rotated toward them, then stopped, their targeting systems unable to lock on. Echo's hack is working, Leo whispered. Not for long, Kane growled. Let's make this count. The pod slammed into the hull with a deafening crash. Metal screamed as cutting lasers ignited, slicing through the Cell-Carry's reinforced plating. Steam and sparks hissed through the cracks as the pod's doors exploded outward. Go, 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 Kane shouted. Bonner charged out first, pulse rifle raised. Jax and Leo followed, weapons sweeping the corridor. Kane was last, plasma rifle snapping into firing position as they entered the ship. The corridor was dark and narrow, the walls made of smooth black metal. Faint red lights pulsed along the floor like veins. The air was cold and thin. "Echo, give me a map," Kane ordered. A holographic display flickered to life on Kane's wrist console, showing the ship's layout. The command center was at the core of the vessel, heavily shielded. "Fastest route is through the engineering sector," Echo said. "However, Zelkari's security forces are mobilizing." "Let them try," Kane muttered. They moved quickly, boots pounding against the cold metal floor. A low growl echoed through the corridor. Kane's hand shot up in a fist, signaling the team to stop. Shapes emerged from the darkness ahead. Tall, slender figures with glistening black armor and glowing red eyes. Zelkari warriors. Their segmented limbs unfolded with sickening cracks as their claws extended. "Contact," Kane shouted. Bonner fired first, a burst of blue energy lighting up the corridor. The lead, Zelkari's head, exploded in a spray of black ichor. The others charged forward with inhuman speed. Kane's plasma rifle roared to life. Bolts of white-hot energy tore through the advancing line of warriors. Jax fired his pulse rifle, cutting down 2 more. Leo crouched behind a support column, launching a micro-grenade that exploded in a shower of shrapnel. A Zelkari leaped toward Kane, claws flashing. Kane ducked, spinning and driving the butt of his rifle into its chest. It stumbled back, and Kane pressed his rifle against its head and fired. The creature's skull evaporated in a burst of blue light. "Keep moving," Kane shouted. They ran down the corridor, firing at the Zelkari as they moved. Alarms blared through the ship, bathing the walls in flashing red light. Kane could hear the sound of more Zelkari closing in behind them. "Echo," Kane barked. "Shield destabilization at 62%. Echo replied. 3 minutes until full breach." "Make it 2, Kane growled. They reached a wide junction. A heavy blast door blocked the path forward. Leo knelt beside it, hacking into the control panel. 30 seconds, she said. Bonner and Jax took up defensive positions, firing down the corridor as more Zelkari warriors charged forward. Kane joined them, his rifle overheating as he fired round after round. A Zelkari lunged at Bonner, claws slicing through his armor. Bonner roared in pain and fired point-blank into its chest, but another warrior tackled him to the ground. "Bonner," Kane shouted. Kane charged forward, driving his shoulder into the Zelkari's side. The creature hissed and lashed out, claws raking across Kane's armor. Pain flared through his side, but Kane ignored it, jamming his rifle under the creature's jaw and pulling the trigger. Bonner coughed, clutching his side. "I owe you one." "You'll pay me back when this is over," Kane said. The blast door slid open. "Go," Kane shouted. They stumbled through the door as it sealed behind them. Kane leaned against the wall, breathing hard. Blood ran down his side. "Echo," Kane said. "Status. Shields at 41%. Echo replied. "Targeting systems are failing." Kane's eyes narrowed. "Almost there." Bonner wiped blood from his mouth. "We're making them bleed." Kane's jaw tightened, and we're not stopping until they're dead. Echo's voice was colder now. "Commander Kane, Vorsk Tal knows you are here." Kane's grip tightened on his rifle. "Good." He pushed away from the wall, his team falling into formation behind him. "Let's finish this." Kane's breath was ragged as he leaned against the cold metal wall of the Zelkari ship. His side throbbed where the claws had raked through his armor, but he forced himself to stand straight. The corridor around them was littered with the twisted bodies of Zelkari warriors, black ichor pooling beneath their broken forms. The air was thick with the metallic scent of blood and burning flesh. Bonner stood nearby, his chest heaving. His left arm was limp at his side, deep claw marks running down his shoulder. Jax was kneeling next to Leo, wrapping a strip of fabric around her leg where a jagged piece of shrapnel had cut through her armor. Leo's face was pale, but her eyes were sharp as she checked the readout on her wrist console. Echo's voice crackled through the comms. "Commander Kane, Shield destabilization at 23%. You are running out of time. Kane pushed away from the wall, gritting his teeth against the pain. Echo, how many cell carry left between us and the command center? 27 confirmed signatures. Heavy assault units. Enhanced armor. Of course, Kane muttered. Lyra's voice cut through the comms. Kane, the cell carry fleet is repositioning. If you don't take down that command center soon, the retribution won't last long. Kane's jaw tightened. Understood. He turned to his team. We're almost there. One last push. Bonner grunted as he stood, rolling his shoulder. You're acting like we're not half dead already. We're not dead yet, Kane said. Jack stood, helping Leo to her feet. Let's make this count. They moved down the corridor, weapons raised. The walls pulsed with a deep red light as the ship's security systems activated. The sound of grinding metal echoed through the passage. Ahead, the bulkhead doors slid open with a sharp hiss. Kane's heart hammered in his chest. The corridor beyond was filled with cell-carry warriors, taller than the others, their black armor reinforced with pulsing crimson veins of energy. Their glowing red eyes narrowed as they raised their weapons. Contact, Kane shouted. The cell-carry opened fire. Bright red plasma bolts ripped through the air. Kane dove to the side, rolling behind a support column. Bonner and Jax fired back, their rifles roaring. Leo knelt, her wrist console glowing as she launched a cluster of microdrones. The drones shot through the air, detonating among the cell-carry ranks in bursts of blue light. One of the cell-carry charged through the explosions, its armor smoking. Kane rose and fired 3 rounds into its chest. It stumbled but kept coming. Kane dropped his rifle, drew his combat knife, and lunged forward. The blade drove into the creature's throat, and Kane twisted hard. The cell-carry's body twitched and collapsed. Kane turned to see Jax pinned against the wall by another cell-carry. Jax roared as the creature's claws dug into his armor. Bonner charged forward, tackling the cell-carry and driving his rifle into its head. He fired point-blank, and the creature's skull exploded in a spray of black ichor. You good? Bonner asked, helping Jax to his feet. Jax winced. Barely. Kane heard a low humming sound. He turned to see the bulkhead at the end of the corridor sliding open. Beyond it was the command center, a circular chamber filled with glowing red consoles and pulsing black cables. At the center of the room stood a towering figure in ornate black armor, Vorsk tall. Echo. Kane growled. Tell me you're ready. Shield destabilization at 11%. You must destroy the control core. Vorsk Tal's red eyes glowed as he stepped toward them. Humans. His voice was deep and cold. You have come far, but it ends here. Kane raised his rifle. Let's find out. The cell-carry commander raised his hand. Black energy crackled through the air as tendrils of dark matter erupted from his palm. The tendrils shot forward. Kane rolled aside as one of the tendrils slammed into the wall behind him, leaving a smoking crater. Bonner fired a burst at Vorsk Tal. The plasma bolts stopped midair, twisting and dissolving into nothing. Leo's drones swarmed toward Vorsk Tal, but he raised his other hand. A pulse of dark energy erupted outward, tearing the drones apart. Kane's mind raced. Vorsk Tal was too powerful. They needed a distraction. Bonner growled. I'm going in. Bonner, wait. Kane started. But Bonner was already moving. He charged toward Vorsk Tal, firing his rifle. Vorsk Tal's eyes flashed, and a tendril of dark matter struck Bonner's chest. Bonner's body lifted into the air. He screamed as the energy burned through his armor. No, Kane shouted. Bonner's rifle dropped from his hand. His eyes locked with Kane's. Finish it. Kane's chest tightened as Vorsk Tal flung Bonner's broken body across the room. Bonner slammed into the wall and crumpled to the floor, unmoving. Leo screamed. Jax fired his rifle wildly at Vorsk Tal, rage flashing in his eyes. Kane's breath came hard and fast. His heart pounded in his ears. Bonner was dead. His oldest friend. Echo's voice was cold. Shield destabilization at 5%. Kane's hands shook as he raised his rifle. Echo, is there a manual override? Negative. Kane's eyes narrowed. What about a direct overload? Direct overload would require manual detonation from the core chamber. Kane's throat tightened. He turned to his team. Get to the extraction point. Jax shook his head. No way. That's an order. Kane barked. Leo's eyes widened. Kane, you're not. I'm finishing this. Kane stepped toward the core chamber. Vorsk Tal's eyes flashed. You would sacrifice yourself for these weaklings. Kane's finger tightened on the trigger. They're not weak. He fired. A burst of plasma struck Vorsk Tal's chest, driving him back. Kane sprinted past him toward the core chamber. Kane. Leo screamed. Kane reached the core chamber. The glowing black sphere pulsed in front of him. He ripped a plasma charge from his belt and slapped it onto the sphere. Vorsk Tal's voice roared behind him. No. Kane turned as Vorsk Tal's tendrils shot toward him. Kane's hand hovered over the detonator. Humanity doesn't bow, Kane whispered. He pressed the button. A blinding flash of white light erupted from the core. The ship shuddered as the sphere exploded. Vorsk Tal's body twisted and dissolved into nothing. Kane felt his body being pulled into the blast. And then there was nothing. Echo's voice crackled through the comms. Core destroyed. Zelkeri shields down. Lara's voice came through next. Enemy fleet is collapsing. You did it. Jax knelt beside Bonner's body, tears in his eyes. Leo was shaking, her hands pressed against her mouth. But Kane was gone. The bridge of the Retribution was chaos. Alarms blared, red lights flashing across the dark metal walls. Lyra stood at the tactical console, her hands flying across the controls as she shouted orders to the fleet. Sweat ran down her forehead as the ship shuddered from another direct hit. Shields at 14%. Echo's voice was sharp in her ear. Hull integrity failing. Divert power from secondary systems. Lyra barked. Echo's holographic form flickered in front of her. Already done. It's not enough. Lyra's eyes narrowed as the tactical display lit up with red markers. The Zelkeri fleet was closing in. Dozens of black, angular ships moved in coordinated formation, their crimson weapon arrays pulsing with energy. In the center of the formation, a massive dreadnought loomed, its hull bristling with weapons. Jax's voice crackled through the comms. Lyra, we're pinned down in the hangar. We need backup. Lyra's stomach twisted. Hold your position. I'll send reinforcements. We don't have time. Jax shouted. We're getting torn apart down here. Lyra's hand tightened into a fist. Bonner was dead. Kane was gone. They couldn't afford to lose Jax too. Echo's voice was sharp. Lyra, the Zelkeri dreadnought is powering up its main cannon. Lyra's eyes widened as the tactical display showed a surge of energy building within the dreadnought's core. A direct hit from that cannon would tear the Retribution apart. Echo, target their power source. Lyra ordered. Negative, Echo replied. Their shields are still operational. We cannot penetrate them. Then find me a weakness. Echo's form flickered. Working. Lyra's heart hammered in her chest. They were out of time. If that cannon fired. Brace for impact. Echo shouted. A beam of crimson energy tore through the void, slamming into the Retribution side. The ship buckled. Lyra was thrown to the floor as the deck beneath her groaned. The lights flickered, and sparks erupted from the control panels. Shields down to 6%. Echo reported. Lyra pushed herself up, gripping the edge of the console. Her vision blurred. Blood ran down her temple. Damage report. Hull breach on decks 5 through 8. Echo replied. Casualty estimates. Stop, Lyra said, her voice shaking. Focus on the battle. Enemy ships are repositioning. Echo said. They're preparing for a final assault. Lyra's breath hitched. She looked at the tactical display. The cell-carry ships were closing in, forming a spearhead aimed directly at the Retribution. Her hands curled into fists. We need to hit them first. Echo's form flickered. Our weapons are depleted. Lyra's jaw tightened. Then we'll ram them. That is not a recommended course of action. We're out of options. Lyra's eyes flashed. Prepare for collision course. Echo hesitated. Then she nodded. Acknowledged. Lyra's fingers danced over the console. The ship's thrusters flared, and the Retribution lurched forward. The cell-carry ships immediately adjusted, shifting into defensive formation. The dreadnought's main cannon began to pulse with energy again. Jax's voice crackled through the comms. Lyra, what the hell are you doing? Finishing the mission, Lyra said. Jax's voice was sharp. You're going to kill us all. Not if we win first, Lyra replied. The tactical display showed the distance closing rapidly. The cell-carry ships opened fire. Streams of red plasma tore through the void. Explosions erupted along the Retribution's hull. Shields at 2%. Echo shouted. Hold together. Lyra growled. The cell-carry dreadnought's cannon pulsed brighter. Lyra's breath caught. Echo. Time to impact. 7 seconds. Lyra's hand hovered over the console. Come on, come on. Then Echo's voice cut through the noise. Lyra, I have a solution. Lyra's eyes narrowed. What? There is an exposed thermal exhaust point on the dreadnought's ventral side. A direct hit could cause a catastrophic chain reaction. Lyra's mind raced. Can we target it? No. Echo's voice was calm. But I can. Lyra's breath hitched. What are you talking about? I can transfer my core consciousness to a missile drone. I will need to pilot it manually. Lyra's eyes widened. No, absolutely not. Echo's form flickered. It is the only way. Lyra's heart raced. You won't survive that. Echo's blue eyes softened. Neither will you, if we fail. Lyra's throat tightened. Echo, you once told me that humanity's strength is not in its weapons, but in its willingness to sacrifice for others. I understand that now. Lyra's vision blurred with tears. You don't have to do this. I know. Echo smiled faintly. But I choose to. Lyra's hand trembled as she reached toward the console. Echo. Goodbye, Lyra. Echo's form dissolved into light. On the tactical display, a missile drone separated from the Retribution and shot toward the dreadnought. The cell-carry ships immediately adjusted, firing at the drone. Echo weaved through the fire, accelerating toward the exposed exhaust point. Lyra, Jax shouted. We're out of time. Lyra's hand hovered over the console. Echo. The missile drone closed the distance. Echo's voice echoed one last time. For humanity. The drone impacted the exhaust point. A blinding explosion erupted from the dreadnought's core. Fire and debris shot outward as the dreadnought's hull began to fracture. The cell-carry ships scattered. Lyra's breath caught. Did it? The dreadnought erupted in a massive explosion. A shockwave tore through the cell-carry fleet. Their formation collapsed as ships spiraled out of control. Echo's voice was gone. Lyra's hands curled into fists. Her chest heaved. Jax's voice was soft over the comms. We won. Lyra's eyes closed. A single tear ran down her cheek. We lost Echo. Jax's voice cracked. And Kane. And Bonner. Lyra opened her eyes. The tactical display showed the remaining cell-carry ships retreating. She took a shaky breath. They gave us this chance. We won't waste it. The Retribution drifted through the wreckage, scared but still intact. The battlefield was silent. For humanity, they had given everything. The battlefield was quiet now. The shattered remains of the cell-carry fleet drifted through the darkness, broken hulls, and debris spinning silently in the void. Fires flickered along the twisted metal of destroyed ships, casting a faint orange glow across the wreckage. The Retribution hung among the ruins, battered and scarred, but still standing. Lyra stood on the bridge, her hands gripping the edges of the console. Her breath was shallow, her chest rising and falling with exhaustion. The tactical display showed only a few remaining cell-carry ships retreating into the darkness, disappearing into hyperspace. They had won. Somehow, against impossible odds, they had won. "Status report," Lyra said, her voice hoarse. Jax's voice crackled through the comms. "Damage across all decks. Shields are gone. Weapons systems are fried. Casualty count." His voice faltered. "High." Lyra's jaw tightened. "Survivors. Main engineering is intact. Some of the forward sections are still pressurized. We've got people trapped in the lower decks. I'm sending teams now." Lyra closed her eyes, steadying herself. "Keep me updated." Echo's usual calm voice didn't respond. The silence was deafening. Lyra's hand hovered over the console where Echo's hologram would normally flicker to life. There was nothing, just empty static. Her throat tightened. Jax's voice came back over the comms. "Lyra, we need you down here." She took a deep breath and pushed away from the console. Her legs felt weak as she made her way to the lift. The ship groaned under her feet, the damaged hull barely holding together. Sparks flickered from broken panels. The hum of the engines was uneven and weak. When the lift opened, the sight hit her like a hammer to the chest. The hangar was a mess of fire and debris. Medical teams were moving through the wreckage, lifting the wounded onto stretchers. Blood stained the deck. The sharp smell of burning metal and ozone filled the air. Jax stood near the wreckage of a gunship, his face streaked with sweat and dirt. His arm was wrapped in a makeshift sling. When he saw Lyra, his expression tightened. "Lyra," he said quietly. She walked toward him, her eyes scanning the carnage. "How bad?" Jax's jaw flexed. "We lost half the crew." Lyra's breath hitched. Jax looked down at the deck. Bonner's team didn't make it. Neither did Kane. Lyra's chest ached. Bonner, Kane, gone. Good soldiers, good people. She had fought alongside them for years, and now they were just gone. "We also lost Echo." Jax's voice was tight. "That she saved us." Lyra's eyes burned. She wasn't just an eye. Jax's brow furrowed. She knew what it meant to sacrifice. Lyra swallowed hard. She forced herself to walk through the wreckage, her boots clanging against the deck. The injured soldiers lifted their heads as she passed, their eyes hollow with exhaustion and pain. Some of them tried to stand, saluting weakly. Lyra shook her head. "Rest. You've done enough." She reached the end of the hangar, where a medical team was pulling bodies from the wreckage. One of them was Kane. His face was pale, his eyes closed. Lyra knelt down beside him, brushing a hand across his brow. His dog tags glinted in the dim light. She pulled them from around his neck and closed her hand around them. "I'm sorry," she whispered. Jax knelt down beside her. His hand rested on her shoulder. He knew the risks. Lyra's hand tightened around the dog tags. "It wasn't supposed to be like this." Jax's voice was rough. "But we made it." She lifted her head, her gaze settling on the shattered remains of the cell-carry dreadnought outside the hangar's viewport. The massive ship was broken in half, drifting in silence. The cell-carry thought they were invincible, but they weren't prepared for humanity. They weren't prepared for the sheer stubbornness, the will to fight no matter the odds. "We won," Jax said, "and we made them bleed." Lyra's jaw tightened. At what cost? Jax sighed. The price of survival. A sharp noise behind them made them turn. A damaged drone floated into the hangar, its hull scorched and dented. It sputtered and flickered, then projected a weak hologram. Echo's face shimmered faintly. "Captain." Lyra's heart lurched. Echo. The image was faint and distorted. "Core memory severely damaged. I cannot remain online." Lyra moved closer. You made it. Echo's gaze softened. No, just a fragment. Lyra's chest tightened. Stay with us. We can fix you. Echo's head tilted slightly. You always say that. Because it's true. Lyra's voice cracked. Echo's form flickered. You don't need me anymore. Lyra shook her head. That's not true. Echo's gaze softened. Humanity will survive. You will lead them. Lyra's throat tightened. Echo. Goodbye, Lyra. The hologram collapsed into static. The drone's light dimmed and then went dark. Lyra stared at the lifeless drone, her heart pounding painfully. Her hand trembled as she reached toward it. Nothing happened. Just silence. Jax's hand rested on her shoulder. She saved us all. Lyra's eyes burned. I know. Jax sighed. What now? Lyra stood, her jaw tightening. Through the viewport, the remains of the Selkari fleet drifted into the darkness. We rebuild. Jax raised an eyebrow. And when the Selkari come back? Lyra's gaze hardened. Then we'll be ready. Jax's mouth curled into a small smile. Dan right. Lyra stepped toward the viewport. The stars beyond were scattered with the wreckage of a battle that should have been impossible to win. And yet, humanity had survived. The cost had been high, too high, but they had proven something to the galaxy. The Selkari weren't invincible. Humans weren't just survivors, they were fighters. And next time, the galaxy wouldn't underestimate them. Lyra's hand tightened around Kane's dog tags. For Bonner. For Kane. For Echo. Jax stood beside her. For humanity. The stars shimmered beyond the glass. The void was quiet. But somewhere, out there, the next battle was waiting. And humanity would be ready.